And this session is going to be on utility initiatives. So I think this is where we start hearing all the stuff we've been talking about the last couple of days. Now we're going to see how it's being put into practice. So we have a great panel today, and we have different size utilities from like the really large ones like DC Water to Halifax County, which is one of your smaller utilities, and we have some in between too. So our speakers will just come up in order. And the first one we have today is from DC Water for William Elridge. So you want to come on up here and present. We'll just go one by one, and each one of the speakers will give you a brief introduction about what they do. But this is really where we start seeing data come into action. So, as I like to say, we're really limited by our imagination on what we can do with it. So you're going to see a lot of good examples of different ways of dealing with data and how it improves our utilities. Okay, William. There's a mic up there. Oh.
Is that a good mic check? Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is William Elridge. I'm the Director of Engineering and Technical Services at DC Water. It is a fascinating conference. I second all the sentiments that have been spoken before. That keynote was fantastic. I really do look forward to that documentary. That has the opportunity to be something really special, I believe. I am here today to talk a little bit about building a smart digital utility of the future. So a question I have is that we're all going to invent, right? Is what is the future? So I've got, from my cover slide, here's an image of our headquarters building. This headquarters building is a LEED certified building. Each of the floors, as it goes up, is a little bit wider, and it has those panels that you can see on the outside. A big glass building has a lot of a heat effect, but it was designed in such a way that it has energy efficiency built into it for the heating and the cooling of the building. It's LEED certified. This is a futuristic building. It's in the present. So what is the future? Going backwards, this picture is about 110 years old. So where are we going to be 110 years from now? Quick story about this picture. This is a cast iron pipe going in 1908. Obviously, being drawn there, I will confess, I don't know if that's a horse or a mule, but maybe somebody in the room knows. But there was a company that existed in this area at that time that was trying to become 10% more efficient at shoeing horses. Right? We've all heard that story about that company that was just trying to get more efficient and more efficient and more efficient at shoeing horses in a time when it didn't really matter, right? Was anybody at any of those companies thinking about the right polymerization of the rubber for the tires that we're driving in vehicles today? Probably not. But when we think about the future of the water industry, there's probably somebody in this room, probably one of your students, probably somebody in high school that really does have the key for that future of what is that future state 110 years from now, right? Something that we all probably can't imagine, just as these two pictures actually happen to only be 2 years apart, but from the confines of looking at that mode of transportation being predominantly horse-drawn, transitioning to something that is motorized and wheeled is a significant transition. This is our Bryant Street pump station, built around the same time. A masterpiece for its time. To be honest, a masterpiece for today. It's a phenomenal pump station. This is what it looks like on the inside today. Some of this looks like it did 112 years ago. Some of it has been upgraded over time, of course. The lead paint has been encapsulated. All kinds of things have been done to make it safer, to keep it running, and it supplies Washington, D.C. with clean water. So what is our future? What I've got here is at DC Water, we have our strategic plan. We call it Blueprint 2.0. It charts the path for what is the future of our organization. Within that, we have 5 imperatives, starting at the top there with equitable. There's been some conversation at this conference about equity and the importance thereof. And in Washington, D.C., that's particularly important. Communities that have been underserved for decades, it just is what it is. And water is part of the solution to remedying that historic injustice. Sustainability, it's in our buildings, it's in our infrastructure, it's in our energy consumption, it's in the way we do things. Resilience and reliability, our capital program goes a long ways toward making everything we have more resilient and reliable. And then healthy, safe, and well. If we're not being safe, we're not creating that future. If we're not healthy, that future, being healthy makes that future better. It makes it worth achieving and creating. So I have a few slides that Ollie presented 2 days ago, actually, and this is one of them. What is our future, right? Digitalization 2.0 that Ollie presented on just a couple of days ago. I'm not going to repeat what he said. I'm just going to talk about this little arrow over there, right? So at DC Water, we have a lot of really smart people, in this room. We have really smart consultants, right? Ollie in particular, not to call you out, but I'm going to call you out actually a little bit, right? He's been tasked with creating what is that future of that smart water, right? He's leading our modeling and our future of what is the intelligence of water that we have, right? So we've got this beautiful roadmap for digital 2.0. When you pull all these things together, what does it really create, right? I put forth that we don't know that answer yet, but that with the people in the room, we will create it and learn and find out what it is. And Ollie's on point to make that happen. So here's another slide that he presented. The flow of information, we've talked a little bit at this conference about big data and all those sources, right? The ability for that to flow in a more efficient way. And at DC Water, we talk about tearing down the silos within the organization, right? Building bridges between the different parts of the organization. Data is part of that, right? That's actually the present, right? We have a lot of those things that are working today. Our data-driven decisions, right? We've got this roadmap. We've got these tools. They're all beautiful. They are all the future. To a degree, they're also all the present. So a quick story. In a previous line, I owned a small apartment complex, and I went on vacation for a little while, and it was winter time, and we came back, and we pulled up. And there's this bush sitting out in the front of the apartment complex, completely covered in ice. Like, well, that's kind of interesting. Nothing. I mean, there was a small covering of snow. Why is this bush suddenly this big ice sculpture? I was new to the world of property maintenance, and there was a shutoff valve for an external copper pipe that was running up the side of the building that I had not shut off. So while we were gone, it froze, it burst, and it was shooting water out over this bush, and it would get soaked during the day, and then everything would freeze up overnight. And that happened, as near as I can tell, for 4 or 5 days in a row, right? This was 25 years ago. Today we have the technology. I could have pulled up my iPad and said, dunk, dunk, dunk. It notifies me that something is happening. I can shut it off remotely. The technology for customer alerts for anomalies, for example, is one of those things, both in the future and in the present. So what is our future? This is a picture at Blue Plains. I sit in COF. This is a picture from the roof of our solar panels going in. It is the more efficient energy consumption, energy creation, and use of the natural and renewable resources that we have. Is that part of the future? Absolutely. 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 Is it part of the present as well? Yes. Is there going to be something else that comes behind this that makes everything else a bigger, better, brighter future? Absolutely, 100%. So what's the real future? There's a few folks in the room from DC Water and a few folks who are from the surrounding area actually know these two gentlemen. So what is the future of water? What is the future of DC Water? What is the future of our industry? I submit it's actually the people. right? We're not doing this just because it's interesting or fun. Now, it does happen to be interesting and fun. Um, Me, along with many of you, got into this side of the business because um, we liked figuring out how things work, right? We were probably good at math. We were probably good at science. We liked figuring out, what happens when you do this and this and some other thing happens, right? Um, we we're the root of what we're doing, right? Water is life. That's our tagline, but it's a phrase that's pretty common in our industry. It's for life. It's for people. Everything we're doing is by people. We can have all the big data in the world, and there will be some person that's coding something, writing some who knows what that's in the future, that makes that useful for other people. So Renard and Curtis, or the two gentlemen here, they're still at DC Water as of today. Um, they are the future of the organization. They are people that work there today, making that better future. The other, and basically everybody in this room really is the future. In particular, as we look to your students, and we hire some of your students. That bigger, brighter future really is rooted, I believe, in the people, the customers that we serve. There's a community an hour away from our nation's capital that doesn't have clean water supply, right? A clean drinking water. There are places within this country that don't have that. There's a couple billion people on the planet that don't have it. The future of water resolves that. It does things that are just so much bigger than each and every one of us individually. That is my thesis statement. That's my summary. In conclusion, what I believe our future is at DC Water is the future of water is people. Um, I appreciate very much the opportunity to come and share that thought. I know it's a little bit cloudy and fluffy. I do believe that is the definition of innovation. If you look at those vehicles from the very first slide, at some point in time, somebody said, "Hey, let's motorize this wagon." That was a weird, fluffy, kind of innovative thought at the time, and that's going to be a constant thing. Knowing that the future of water is people, and that people are the future of water, is a wonderful, beautiful thing. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. We'll have a question and answer session at the end here, and we can save your questions to then, please. Okay, I know y'all are in suspense here. Who's coming next? Okay, great. So next we're going to have a presentation by Lingyi Zhang from WSSC. And she's
Morning, everyone. morning, everyone. I'm Ling Zhang. I'm from WSSC Water Asset Management. I believe on the agenda, my title is still Acting Division Manager. I'm not. I'll be one of the person on the slides. Okay. So here, a few slides. I guess the structure, what we plan to go is some high-level discussion of our program. And then talk a little bit about analytics initiatives within asset management in our commission. Okay, so I'm sorry, how do we? Oops. Okay, all right, so what do? We are within asset management, right? So asset management, the purpose, three few main function. We want to extend asset life, life of assets we own, to provide optimized asset management strategies, including maintenance and renewal, and also to develop accurate and long-term funding strategies to support asset management initiatives. And then with that purpose in mind, who are within our asset management program, right? So within WSSC, we have 3 divisions that perform this function. At the enterprise level, we have asset management division, and then this shows the structure. In our division, we have a division manager. I'm actually the infrastructure optimization specialist. We have economic analysts and project managers. And in our division, we also have 2 network asset strategy managers for water and wastewater. So at enterprise level, our division is more related to developing. And I saw our previous division manager here, Hugh Sinclair, sitting in the back. Right, and then so at enterprise level, we are more involved with developing enterprise-wise process and procedures, programs, and so that's what we do at enterprise level. And also we have 2 separate divisions at what we call system level, and they're closer to operations, right? So in asset management, we have 1 division in what we call utility services and asset management division, which are responsible for water and wastewater buried assets. And then we have a similar division, production support division. That's the asset management division within our production development, production department, which manages our vertical assets or facility assets. So treatment plants, pumping stations, storage facilities, and our administrative facilities. So now we talked about who we are and what do we do. So this is a more detailed processes, asset management related processes or functions we perform. In the longer term, like for longer term planning, then we produce asset management plans, right? So asset management plans are documents, reports we produce that will show, answer like the core EPA asset management questions to support asset management, right? So what do we have? What is the required level of service we provide? And what are the critical assets? What are the best capital and operating and maintenance strategy to support asset management? And what is our funding strategies to support infrastructure investment needs? And so that's for from the planning or longer term perspective. At the same time, like we are also very involved on the more operations level, right? So our division, like there are 3 things like listed here. So we manage the project needs validation process. So this is a process that was developed for reviewing and approving capital projects, right? And then this process was developed with a purpose to provide a more consistent and objective framework when to evaluate capital project needs. And we have actually we have a standard procedure developed for this process, and then we have a committee that meets every month to review capital project needs. And then this committee includes members from our main like operations department and also finance department, so that we can have a like more comprehensive view of the needs. And then our division also manages business cases. So for certain projects, it can be capital projects, sometimes it can be operating initiatives as well. And then we have a business case process for to evaluate like what's the best alternative to perform certain activities. And then for capital project, we also have a capital project prioritization process that shows in here. And then this process, this framework is used to prioritize our capital projects, right? So capital projects that have been approved then go through this prioritization process. And this process is actually used more often in recent years, unfortunately due to budget constraints. So we use this process. Asset management has been asked to use this process to prioritize project and see if any projects can be deferred, right? But because of because of budget constraint. So this one, I'm not sure how clear it is. Oh, actually, it's pretty clear. We have big screens. That's good. So this shows like we have who we are, what do we do, and then this shows what we use to perform our functions, right? So on the left-hand side, that shows, and I'm sorry, it might be a little more technical than other talks. I hope I don't bore you. Right. So on the left-hand side, that shows the source systems we use to support our work. And then so we will have, for example, we'll have GIS for our buried assets. We have two different work order system, one for buried assets, one for and one for vertical assets. That in the middle here, that on the left-hand side, you see Teams or Oracle WAM. That's our work order systems. And then we have other systems that go into Teams, going to WAM. And then in the middle are the like major applications we use for asset management, right? So we have decision support system, Riva here, which is actually a power plan. It's called Power Plan IOA, I believe. I'm sorry, AIO. So assets and investment optimization software in Riva. And then we also use SAS for various analytic efforts. And then we also use Optimatics. I believe they're part of Suez now, and we have a discussion from Suez. And on the right-hand side, you will see different functions or business processes we do. So on the top, for example, like I don't plan to go through every single one of them, but then we'll have like WMR is our water main replacement program. This is our largest capital program. And then you can see how our decision support export, if you see the data flows come from how the decision support system takes input from our source systems and provide recommendations, right? And recommendations will need to be done, and then going to support different initiatives, right? So we actually use, for example, we use Optimatics to support WMR program project packaging process. And then we have condition assessment that uses recommendations from our decision support system. PIF is what I mentioned, our project needs validation process that also a lot of times the proactive work is based on recommendations from our decision support system. We use our decision support system to support our asset management plans and other analytics work. All right. So now I'm going to talk about some of the analytics initiatives we have done recently. So the first one I want to mention is our RESJ initiative. So this happened a year to 2 years ago. So we actually got requests. We got requests from Montgomery County, which is one of the counties we serve. And we were asked two things. One thing is how we incorporate equity consideration in our budget process, right? And then, so that's the key theme, right? And then another specific suggestion and request actually is listed here. So that says, does your department use quantitative or qualitative data to track program access and or service outcomes for different population groups, right? So this one, we actually, I'll have a few slides here that shows two perspectives. We reach out, we provide our responses. One is focused on service outcomes, right? So our utility services department, which I mentioned, manages our buried assets. So they use our work order system data, which tracks our the few things that we're looking here. We look at water main breaks, we look at sewer backups and overflows, right? And then we use GIS to map those historical data and see to assess like how the communities are impacted by these service outcomes, right? Well, this map shows for sewer, right? So on the left-hand side, we will see SSOs and basement backups by zip code. And on the right-hand side, we also show like in recent years, I believe it's 15, it's 10 or 15 years, we show capital projects, right? So sewer assets that have been done by zip code. And then the purpose of this, of course, like from just looking at the capital work, on the left-hand side, you will see the outcome. And then on the right-hand side, you will see capital work that has been done. And then you should see sort of some level of correlation between these two maps. And at the same time, like if we look at both actually left-hand side and right-hand side, we don't want to see significant pattern, right, for certain things. Of course, understanding that both of this depend on other factors as well, not just equity, right? So because it depends on the age or condition of the assets in a specific zip code. But so this is for sewer, and then on the next one, this is for water. So we look at on the left-hand side and look at water main breaks, and on the right-hand side, we look at new water mains installed by zip code. So looking at these maps, our conclusion is that we do see some correlation between work done and the service outcomes. But of course, like a lot of service outcomes will not show up until longer term, right? So it doesn't happen like you install pipe, then you will see a reduce in water main breaks. But at the same time, our conclusion is we don't really see consistent pattern of like any groups or any zip codes are service different, right? So that's our conclusion on this one. And another perspective we took, and this was actually because this was the request from the county to ask how we incorporate equity consideration in the budgeting process, right? So remember, I showed earlier, we have a CIP project prioritization framework. So we did consider how to incorporate equity-related consideration in our CIP prioritization, right? Instead of developing a new framework, we decided to incorporate equity factors in our current existing prioritization framework, right? So now we look at, so we developed this approach that was actually to be piloted to be used in our FY24 CIP budget cycle. It was actually used in our FY24 CIP budget cycle, and we plan to use it going forward. And then if I can go back, sorry. So I don't know if you remember, like I mentioned, like in our CIP prioritization criteria, we have two categories specifically we thought will relate to this initiative. One is level of service, right? So then, and that relates to what we just looked at. And then also is governance. We have a big category that's governance. Like, so we actually put a lot higher prioritization, a higher score for projects that governance, under governance, there are different things. It can be county policy, it can be regulation, right? And then those projects, as you would expect, will be prioritized much higher. So we consider to incorporate this equity consideration under these, right? And then under governance, for example, specifically, we would look at, we also consider like how we define equity, right? So we decided to go by, for both counties, for Montgomery County, who originally initiated this request, Montgomery County uses EFAs, equity focus areas. They already developed equity focus areas. And then when we did the research, like to see, because we serve both counties, although the request only came from Montgomery County, we want to do similar things for Prince George's County at the same time, but Prince George's County doesn't really have an equity focus areas, but we look at what we have right now. So we decided to use what they call revitalization tax credit districts. So it's a little bit different from equity, because equity, the equity focus areas are purely focused on equity, right? So equity service, equity, but then RTC is a combination of equity and also economic development, right? So, but then this was the best we could find from Prince George's County, and then we reached out to our intergovernmental affairs, and then they approved with our proposal. So we would look at individual CIP projects and see whether they intersect with either the EFAs in Montgomery County or the RTCs in Prince George's County, right? So here is an example for our White Oak sewer main project. And then the project, I believe the blue is where the project is, and the areas, the pink areas is the equity focus area. And you can see that project is within that equity focus area. So for a project like this, we'll just add points under governance. And then so these projects will get benefit from being being beneficial to the RESJ focus. So that was a big initiative we've been working on, and then I'll talk a little bit about some other initiatives we have been working on. I mentioned earlier in the slide when we show the diagram, so we are using Optimatics to optimize project packaging process in our water main replacement program. This is a very large, our largest actually capital program every year. And then, so using that tool and using this initiative can streamline a lot, streamline the package processing process and make it more efficient, right? So we define efficiency, how we monitor efficiency, and then using the tool actually can help us improve the efficiency of the project, because in the past, historically, we use a neighborhood approach. And then although like we have projects that are water mains that are recommended to be replaced, but then because of neighborhoods, and there is valid consideration behind the neighborhood approach, but then because of the neighborhood approach, actually you lose a lot of efficiency when you package project, because you have to do project, not just the ones that you want to replace, and you have to do a lot around that area, right? So through this process, this project, however, we are improving the efficiency of the package processing process. A second one we've been working on, and as we're working on with one consultant to develop machine learning, and they actually use both machine learning and statistical model for water distribution pipe aging curves, and just look at decay curves, right? So that will, we currently only have a desktop, very crude desktop model to predict decay, give condition scores, and this model we're hoping to improve that significantly. And we have seen some preliminary results. It's very it's very promising. We're in the process to go through the internal approval and also to see, I think one of the things that we see, like myself and also like our division managers, previous one, the current one, we try to make, like we can test a lot of analytic efforts, right? But it's important, these efforts only will be truly impactful if we can use it in operations, right? And then we have different initiatives, so we're trying to see how all the pieces fit in together, and then so that we can truly take advantage of all the initiatives. Okay. And then this is some screenshots from, we developed for our own, developed a dashboard to support our asset management plans and other analysis. And then this is some of the screenshots, right? So for example, on the left-hand side, you will see miles of pipes, water and wastewater, water and sewer by installation age. You'll see their condition by different type of assets. And then we have, like, again, on the side, we see different type of assets we have, right? So values and their condition. There are more to this dashboard, but this is something that we developed. And then, because in our program, like, we have our users, like our asset strategy managers, they're engineers, right? They are very fluent with data themselves, but mostly they use Excel. And then in the past, when we do our plans, like, we have to spend a lot of time just reconciling data. And then another good example is looking at pipes by age. We have every year we receive requests from our chief engineer, from communications, from like 2-3 different parties requesting, asking pipes by age. And every single time they say, I get 3 different numbers. So like, this is an effort trying to resolve that so that we can save some time and save some explanation for everyone. This, I feel this, for me, I'm sorry, feels very dear to me. So we work constantly trying to improve data quality in source systems, right? One example is for the machine learning for water pipe decay modeling. Part of that exercise, our consultant actually created a decommissioned water pipe GIS layer. Currently, and then this business process stays that way. We don't keep all the decommissioned pipes. Certain are kept, some certain are not. So our consultant actually developed a process to guess, sort of like, created a decommissioned water pipe in GIS layer, which can be very helpful for us to truly like monitor pipe condition over time, right? To build a model, you will need all the decommissioned pipes to, right? And then we work with our data owners and also IT to trying to address data quality issues. Some of them are like, we just really don't know. I've worked with, for example, with our production department who manages the Oracle WAM system. And then a lot of times when we go look at some task and he just says like, our data is not usable. And then we're trying to address that, right? And then one example I can think about is recently, a year or 2 years ago. So in our asset management plan, we have one specific section, we provide risk registry that are the highest risk assets. And then we found that 3 pipes that have been there since the 1970s. They are, like, if you know where it is, one of them is on River Road, right out of our plant, one of our water treatment plant, and it doesn't have an asset ID, and it's a gigantic transmission main. It's under a major road, and then we found that, and then we work out GIS manager and said like, he just says he said, I have no idea why they don't have a asset ID, right? So things like this, this can not only help us with analytics, I do see the bigger impact is in operations, right? So like data issue can create a lot of issues with operations, efficiency, accuracy. But then so we work together with our data owners and IT to try to do that. I'm sorry, I'm too long. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll be done. Another initiative is we're working with asset management plan monitor. We use again, this is using technology. We develop plans now. Try to move the plans development in SharePoint. I'm sorry. That was the last slide. All right. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lingy. Next up, we have Kieran Fay from South Bend. So he's going to talk about mining data to win at negotiations. So welcome, Kieran.
Thanks, Walter. Hi, I'm from utility. Well, I'm from the city of South Bend, and we run the utility. We're not necessarily a utility ourselves, but we do. We have a complete service for South Bend. So what I'm going to talk about today is trying to be specific in relation to the application of a smart water system and solution. I'm talking about wastewater today. In particular, I'm going to talk about combined sewer overflows, and a number of points that we'll talk about will be the obligations that we were given by the federal government and local, say, state government, the expectations that were placed upon us and the cost that was placed upon us, and the lack of resources that we had, and the way that we were able to solve this problem by using smart infrastructure. So the main three things I'm going to talk about will be that how the smart infrastructure enabled us to improve our maintenance, decrease overflow, and then basically win at negotiations by having data available to us. Okay, so what I'm talking about here, I presume everybody knows this, but basically the purple line there on top is what we've in South Bend. We have CSO networks. You never in the city, you never just have one sewer system. You always have little, networks or basins. So each basin previously, this is always this animated slide. Sorry. Previously, everything used to overflow to the river. We then intercepted these points with an interceptor, hence the name, back in the 50s when we built our wastewater treatment plant. And now only in times of increased rainfall is that weir breached and does an overflow happen. So this was the whole problem. And as you know, based on the 1994 CSO policy, this is something that communities are not meant to do anymore. So we have been trying to do this at an affordable way for the last couple of years, and we've just started now, really. So the obligations then, population, 100,000 people, and very little resources. 30% of households have an income of less than 20,000. 1 in 4 people are persons in poverty. Sewer rates are already up almost 400% since 2004. So that's what we're coming from, a situation of not having a whole lot of money. We've been asked by the EPA and DOJ to do an $863 million price tag as a long-term control plan to achieve the CSO policy's requirements. Obviously, you buy a house for $300,000, you don't spend $300,000 by the time you've paid off your mortgage. So it's the same with this. By the time you finance it, you're talking about $1 billion. Easy, simple maths, 100,000 people, $1 billion, $10,000 per man, woman, and child in the community, which is not, when you have a plan like that, you have absolutely no plan at all. 1 in 5 households would pay 10% of their household income just towards their water bill. So it was a terrible, terrible plan that was luckily preceding my time with the city. And the first thing we had to do was basically throw this plan completely under the bus and get EPA and DOJ to recognize that going out of the blocks that we just had a terrible plan from the start. So that was the first thing. Now, I guess in the accent, I'm not from the States, I'm from Ireland, and previously I worked with the Irish EPA for 10 years. So I've been familiar mostly with that side of the table. I'd also worked in local government in Dublin City. So this is my first time on this side of the table. I was shocked to realize how little power I had in relation to negotiating with EPA and DOJ, that basically we had nothing at all. We were just sitting there and we've been told what to do. We had all we could say was, look, this is far too much money. Show them the maths about not having any resources. But ultimately, there wasn't a huge, their obligation is to get us to sign off on something that's incredibly detailed, and they wanted a very, very specific long-term control plan. So our first thing after we necessarily got them to throw the first plan kind of under the bus was that we had to have something on our side to be able to say, well, you don't have all the power in this negotiation. We have the data. And that was the data that enabled us to say, we're doing something differently in South Bend. You need to listen to us. And that's why we came up with a new plan. So just a quick timeline. CSO policy, pre-2011, South Bend starts smart sewer initiatives. So basically, mid-2000s, we just started putting in some sensors. We had some researchers at our local university, University of Notre Dame, and they started to do, they were working on sensors, just sensors for anything. They didn't know what they wanted to do. So we told them to put the sensors in our sewer system, and let's just start with there. So it was one of the first communities in the States to have that kind of in there. Then federal consent decree was signed, interestingly enough, and not to go off topic, but it was the last day, it was signed on 31st of December 2011 by an outgoing mayor who just felt like he needed to just kind of fall on this grenade kind of a thing and just sign something, because we were there being told at the time that it was going to be a disaster. New mayor came in, and the next day, Pete Buttigieg, the guy who ran for president last couple of years back, and he was given this, but luckily he didn't have to say, well, I didn't, he wasn't told that he had to sign it. So there was a bit of politics there. But anyway, he then tasked me to basically say that, we've got this decree, but we're not going to do it. Basically, we're going to do everything in our power to do something different, and do something that's actually affordable. And luckily, so you wanted something that was more affordable, but better for the environment. It's like, well, that's an easy task. Thanks a lot. So spent a couple of years at my desk thinking. Essentially, we came up with thinking and modeling. Obviously, we came up with a smarter alternative for a greener environment. That in itself was one day's work, working out an acronym that would make some kind of sense. SAGE group. We had a bunch of old retired people from the city, from not from the city entity, but from the community, and they call themselves SAGE. This old guys who were former professors and former accountants and former geniuses, as they describe themselves at everything. And they were like, Kieran, I'm going to tell you how you need to do this plan. So they were a bunch of, on one side, kind of older, like Republican guys who were like, you need to tell the EPA to get lost, and we're going to spend $1 on this plan. Like, well, that's not going to work. And the other side, the more environmentally minded people, the guys who were fishing or paddling in the river, wanted to do more. So anyway, it's a smarter alternative for greener environment because it is smarter. It uses green tech and it uses green technology. Smarter, as in it has the smart sewer technology. So renegotiation took a long time. Most of that was a lot of that time in renegotiation was waiting as well, waiting to get the information back and lighting a fire under regulators as well. It's March of 2022. We finally got a new consent decree signed. So the new consent decree, if you remember, we had that $863 million amount listed. The new consent decree is $276 million. It's actually a better consent decree. It has wet weather capture. I mean, that's basically everything. It's basically capturing everything, 99.96%, 12% less E. coli in the river. And these are the figures that after the EPA had reviewed us, they told us. We had also knew these figures, but they're not going to argue with these. Fewer overflow events, less community disruption, much fewer overflow events. We can get into that in a minute. Community disruption is another thing as well, because we were previously told we had to build 7 large combined sewage storage tanks right across the city, right across people in the that were telling us what to do. Their objective obviously is to mitigate E. coli in the river. They don't necessarily care that you're going to destroy a 150-year-old park to do that. So now we're not actually doing that. We're building tanks in more appropriate places, building less tanks of them. We've eliminated a river crossing, which is not just a cost, but it's a huge environmental risk every time you got across the river. And it developed with community input, a lot of community input this time. The last time, like I said, it was signed in a dark room on the last day of an outgoing mayor, and nothing had community input on it. So real-time control, I'm going to get into the specifics now, but basically the 3 things that we did, like I mentioned, we put in the sensors, we dramatically improved our ability to maintain the sewer system. We then reduced the overflow volume by, first of all, sending less to the river, but also sending less river into the system, which was another huge impact as well, so that we were able to maximize the wastewater treatment plant's capacity. We have a wastewater treatment plant that is 77 million gallons per day. It's part of the consent decree. We're going to bring that to 100. We only sell about 10 to 12 million gallons a day of water. So obviously you've got to do the maths there and work out where the extra stuff is coming from. So the way that the system works in South Bend, it's not all, people talk about sensors and it's all magic, but actually how it works specifically, if you look at the this line here, this line that we call a throttle pipe right here, basically we put in a second throttle pipe in there, and that second throttle pipe has a smart valve that can open and close. And all those valves in the 35 other locations can talk to each other and decide which valve should open. So the space in the interceptor at the bottom is allocated to the sewer network that would otherwise overflow. We've got 42 square miles in South Bend, so and 100,000 people, it's not very densely populated, which means that you do get different rainfall and different snow melt in different parts of the community. Part of the northern city is impacted by lake effect from Lake Michigan, the south isn't. So basically, previously, everything used to have the same access to the interceptor, and now it doesn't. Here's a graphic just to show you of, it's not very well labeled, but basically that's South Bend. You'll see it's river comes from Michigan, hits its southern location there in South Bend, hence the name of our city, and back up into Michigan. So that was another compounding factor to our difficulties, is that we were getting a clean river from Michigan, sending it back, not so clean. And these are just the location of our sensors. Mostly you'll see that they're around the river obviously. But we move them. It's a dynamic system. It doesn't stay in any kind of solid state very often. The sensors can be moved very easily. We have about 150 sensors, mostly just depth. We also have about a dozen or so depth and flow sensors. So I must stress, and this needs to be updated, my apologies, we have built nothing in South Bend in relation to CSO storage. We have just, right now, I'm just managing their development of our first storage tank. But look at these figures here. So look back at 2008, and we had 2 billion gallons with a B of CSO, of combined sewage overflow going to the St. Joseph River. And look at 2020, we had 338 million. Again, we've built nothing. Look at the rainfall in 2008, 48 inches of rain. In 2020, 49 inches of rain. So similar rainfall. But on that log bar that's showing there, you'll see that the increase is phenomenal. Again, we've built nothing in relation to concrete storage. What we have done is we put in the real-time monitoring at the start, which improved the maintenance and our ability to reduce overflow, and the real-time control. The real-time control is basically that the parallel throttle lines that talk to each other. So massive decrease. Another way to look at it, another metric is we kind of came up with it ourselves, hope it makes some sense to you, but it's CSO per inch of rainfall. So at the start of this, an inch of rain used to give us 43 million gallons of overflow into the river. And 2020, that was down to 6.9, again, without having built anything. So our plan was always, first of all, exhaust everything that we can exhaust in relation to smart sewer infrastructure. Then you do a little bit of green infrastructure, which it's a whole other topic that we won't talk about today. And then after that, you've got to build the remaining, because smart is not going to solve everything, but it's going to solve a lot of your problem, and you've got to build a little bit. And then just to show you some of the E. coli values as well. So Alton, you won't know where I am, but basically that's the most northerly point where the river exits our system in South Bend, our city. So again, more success, just showing without having built anything, where the E. coli has dramatically decreased in the community. So revising the plan, I think this is pretty much the last slide. Data-driven maintenance. So the maintenance was increase the capacity. So by increasing, by the first thing, the sensors give us better maintenance, which gives us more capacity. The biggest thing though about the data was we had previously, anytime you develop a long-term control plan, you're using hypothetical data a lot of the time. You're saying, well, in our community, it's going to rain about this much. It did last year. How much of that is going to land on grass? How much is going to land on a park? How much is going to land on a street and a road? How much ultimately is going to make it into the sewer system? So we had the arguments, I suppose, with regulators where you'd argue over models for a very long time. We used our data because we had 10 years worth of data when we started the negotiations. We developed this thing called, there's a lot of acronyms of these committees and these conferences, and it's hard to introduce another one, but this thing we call a CRISNode, a cognitive hydraulic response system, which basically meant that we modeled not using hypothetical data at all. We used only existing data, so that we were able to say essentially what it means is, if we were expecting 2 inches of rain to fall tomorrow, instead of saying what might happen, we would say specifically what will happen, because this is what happened before after having 10 years worth of data. That was the key thing that enabled us to far better locate the CSO storage tanks. Not just locating them, because if you can, it's reducing the size of a CSO storage tank is a cost saving, but it's not that much of a cost saving. Eliminating the tank is the cost saving completely. So the new plan costs less, achieves superior results, added additional time, which that's not a smart thing. That was just smart from us to negotiate. So yeah, it wouldn't have been possible if we didn't have that data, and the data gave us the edge in negotiations to be able to say, hey, EPA, DOJ, IDEM, Indiana Department of Environmental Management, and we know our system, we have the data, we've gathered it. Here's how it's going to react. And then we always like to remind people that these things get so hypothetical, that it is a river and does have life in it. And it's not just about models, it's about cool things like long-nosed gar, steelhead, and the aquatics of the whole thing. Okay, that's it for me. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Karen. That was good indication of what you can do with your data when you put your mind to it. So next up, we have O.J. McFoy from Buffalo Sewer Authority. So,
Walt. Holden, thank you very much. We're good. Forward, backwards. All right, great. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm O.J. McFoy. I am the General Manager of Buffalo Sewer Authority and Chairman of Buffalo Water. I have no cool accent, Karen, but I do bring you greetings from Buffalo and the Super Bowl bound Buffalo Bills. So with that, we always start off with a lovely picture of our Colonel Ward treatment facility. This is our water treatment. While we do have smart sewers in Buffalo, I'm going to keep it here on the drinking water side, but that is our drinking water facility there. And here's the challenges that we have. You know, our first speaker, William, spoke about this is about the people. And so that's where we really approach this. So when we're talking about our data-centric solutions, we're really talking about equity, affordability challenges, water quality, and things like that. But we're talking about our people. Now, you see this picture here of Buffalo. This is what is termed as our disadvantaged communities. It's over 50% of our city. And so you see that area that's color-coded there. We have a range of systemic concerns throughout our city. And really what we focus on is how can we be smarter about delivering solutions that are going to make our community healthier, that are going to make sure that we are being innovative in our investments, and that are going to solve the public health challenges that we have throughout our city that are manifested in through water. And so we always have issues when we talk about affordability. We have a significant amount of our delinquencies. We have a city, and I know Kieran was saying, you know, 1 in 4 people were in poverty. In Buffalo, we're over 30% of our community lives below the federal poverty line, and so we really have a challenge ahead of us. And the way we want to address that challenge is really by trying to be as innovative as we can. So one of the things we talk about for us is on the lead service lines. You know, we all know, lead has really been a focal point. We've really been looking at the challenges there. It's been historic. In the city of Buffalo, we have over 40,000 lead service lines. And as a community and as a utility, we are technically not responsible for what's known as the outside service or the inside service. That is on the homeowner. But what we are responsible for is that water that travels through those pipes, through the home systems, and comes out of that tap. And we're responsible for the water quality and ensuring that not only that our seniors and everyone else, but really our children, our future, are being held safe. But how do we focus in on delivering equitable solutions in that sphere? We're trying to use data science. And I'll say that we also have been looking at other places when we talk about affordability. The one thing that we know, and when you talk about the communities where we've seen them in the headlines, what happens is it's the same line that keeps coming. These were poor communities that did not place the investments in the infrastructure. And we don't want to be in that headline. Buffalo's in there for enough headlines, whether it's the 7 foot of snow we had 2 weeks ago, that's gone, by the way. But we know how to deal with snow, but we're often in those headlines. And what we don't want to be in the headlines is for a catastrophic public health concern. So when we look at things, we start first, not only with affordability, but we're really focusing on what we're doing. So here's the deal with affordability, right? Many times the policymakers will help affordability, or the politicians will be like, well, we can't raise rates. We just can't raise rates. We got to keep it where it is. Well, that's a recipe for disaster. You have to look at your systems, and I know the prior people had spoken about asset management. You have to not only improve those systems and make sure that we're renewing them, but you also have to have those programs in place that are going to make it affordable for your low income customers that are having a tough time, not only with water, but also having a tough time just keeping a roof over their head and keeping food on the table for their families. And so we've developed a number of programs where we really took a deep dive into our standard rates and how that manifested itself throughout our city. We established our affordability programs. We've kind of grown those. We have our senior program, which we kind of chuckle about our senior program and say, we're paying them to use the water. But we have programs that are set in a place where we really focus in on the income levels of our community and how we can be part of this solutions. And so as part of this, we developed an equity index where we've turned into, we've taken a number of socioeconomic factors and kind of layered them on top of each other to come up with this index and really evaluate all of the census tracts throughout the city of Buffalo. And you'll see that, the census tract really looks, very familiar with the concerns that we have for our disadvantaged communities. We've developed just a number of scores and dashboards that we utilize to make sure that not only are we being affordable, but that we are focusing there on our investments in our community. And so we also developed what's known as our continuity metric. And in this space, this is just a quick dashboard here where we talk about, our number of water mains, number of breaks, and then we come up with a break rate, and then linear miles and breaks per mile. Now, the one thing I want to make sure that we're very clear, we always focus in on data. But for us, data is standard, right? It's everybody. Everybody just said, hey, it's about the data, it's about the data. But really, it's about the algorithms. It's how you use those data points. It's how you layer those data pieces to ensure that, hey, you are actually getting to the true solution. So one of the things and the challenges that we had was, hey, we're having main breaks in all of these particular areas. And I want to go to the next slide here. I'm going to skip over this one. Now, we talk about pressure. Now you see right here, the areas that are in white are decent shape. The areas that are in color are the areas of concern for us, right? They are our low pressure areas. And guess what? We're not having breaks in that area. Why not? We don't have pressure. Well, guess who lives in that area? That's 80% people of color. So when you start looking at your data and you step back and start looking at the algorithm, we're not chasing main breaks. These people aren't getting water pressure. Fire flows are horrendous. This is the area where we're focusing in on. Now, if you look at where our main breaks are happening, they're in the other areas where people are getting great pressure. Yes, and we're creating the breaks. And so one of the things that we have to make sure when we talk about data science is really getting into the algorithms and making sure that you are going after what's really wrong. And especially in today's area, when we talk about environmental justice and we talk about these key words like equity, and it gets back to the people that have been overlooked, overburdened, and underserved for far too long. One of the things that we are seeking to address in Buffalo in all of its forms is just that. Let's focus on getting back to those people that we have been overlooking. And it's unfortunate because as a utility, we have been part of the problem, and it's about time that we're part of this solution. And so we talk about also using data not only to address our lead service lines, but really predict where those lead service lines are. We know that the lead and copper rules, and all of the adjustments are coming our way, right? And we're trying to be ahead of the game. We've done a number of things where we've changed our regulations. We've made it illegal to make repairs on lead service lines or galvanized attached to lead service lines. But really, we've been focusing in on where are they? How can we get to them? How can we ensure that the populations there are remaining safe? So we have, using our predictive models that we've developed, we're looking at where these locations are and how we can get to them and address them. And then using our predictive analytics, especially our artificial intelligence pieces, this the likelihood, the cost, and bringing those all together to saying, hey, how can we really expedite this program to get these things done quicker, faster, making sure that they are in the right location with our eye always focused in on equity. And so this slide right here focuses in on how we took a look at this, all of the households, really breaking it down. This is in the corner of our city, and you'll see this is our north west corner of our city, and this is an area where we have a significant population of new Americans that have come in, really from Burmese and throughout, where from Somali and Burmese that have come into this area, which is an older section of our city. And we're looking and utilizing our data science as well as the algorithms that we put together to kind of narrow down the households with the likelihood of a lead service line, as well as having a low cost, as well as having like young age children. And you'll see the difference from filtering out through our model of what it is to where we should really be focusing in on. But we're not only using it in our lead service lines, we're also looking using it and seeking to use it in our capital planning. And I know a couple speakers have spoken about that, saying, hey, how are we doing our project? Are we doing our project because we're getting all of the phone calls from this particular area? Well, guess what? That community thinks that they can get solutions by making a phone call. And there's another disinvested community that doesn't believe that they can get solutions by making a phone call. So it's on us really to use that data to make sure that the algorithms make sense and to make sure that we then are following through, not on just the easy projects, but on the projects that most matter, not only to our system, but to our community. So we are seeking to do that as well. And then we're just seeking to optimize that capital planning, right? So not only taking all of the data that we have and putting it all together, making sure that we're focused on equity, making sure we're addressing the critical service needs of our utility, but really also focusing in on facility types. So those most needed. So in the area of child cares and schools and really focusing on the hospital areas and service care centers for our seniors and making sure that the infrastructure is right in our most critical areas. And with that, I just wanted to make sure it was short, sweet, stayed on time. Hopefully we can catch back up and look forward to the question and answering. So Walter, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, OJ. Next up, we have Mark Estes from Halifax County. He's going to talk about a small system.
They didn't download it once. I did it wrong. They had one download to desktop that was revised. No, this was an actual. It says Estes Swim Estes. Yeah, it's right. To a PowerPoint. All right. Well, good morning. What's difficult is coming behind four incredible topics and speakers. And I always have a mixed emotion when you go behind such great topics. They've already, I guess, introduced you to the same concepts, yet they present it in a much better fashion. But if you think about what is a mixed emotion, it's when your mother-in-law or your boss drives your new vehicle over a cliff. At that moment, you don't know quite how to think. And so keep that in mind as we go through this morning, okay? My name is Mark Estes. I've been doing this 38 years, public administration and utility management. I've had a myriad history of fire service, been a fire official, building code official, E&S administrator. Started off as a journeyman master machinist on a millwright. So I've had a lot of mechanical background and understanding of what's going on here. I've titled this presentation, Much Ado Without Nothing. Small systems a lot of times operate with very limited budgets and very limited resources for money. But what we're seeing now is that small systems actually did receive some federal money because of lower MHIs or because of lower customer base. And they were given these new systems, but now those new systems have aged out. The life expectancy is run near the end, no asset management program. And so they're faced with low rates. And how do we replace a system that we were given, but we weren't given the tools to manage and operate it? So Benjamin Franklin once said, our necessities never equal our wants. I think we're now reaching to that break point where necessities are almost becoming our wants. And resiliency and sustainability are synonymous. We deal with the same issues that you're seeing. We're seeing workforce retention and development issues. I think I'm missing a slide, so this may be the wrong presentation again, but we'll see. Workforce retention and development. We're looking at the same issues you are: salaries, medical benefits, retirement, continuing education, burnout, examination, and reciprocity. We're having a difficult time with the national testing because a lot of states that have individual state tests in North Carolina, which are near where we are, there's no reciprocity in Virginia for us to hire an operator from across the state lines without having to go through a new examination program. So those things small systems are seeing, just like you are in metropolitan areas where you're close to other states. A little bit about Halifax County, and I'm gonna go back just for a second. We're in Southside Virginia, 50 miles south of Lynchburg, Virginia, and 50 miles north of Durham Research Triangle Park area. In a rural area, a lot of heritage was agricultural, low to median household income, and geographically, our county is 48 miles long and 37 miles wide. So it's pretty good sized county land area, a large area to geographically serve and get utilities to. I manage 5 systems: surface water, groundwater. We have 1 membrane systems. We have a couple of reclamation plants, and we also serve 1 million gallons a day of reclaimed water to a local cogeneration facility that uses biofuel or wood products to generate electricity. So asset management, rural small systems struggles are not unique to us. If you look at the demographics, I think there's close to 149,000 community waterworks in the United States. 9% of those serve 257 million people. And so the remaining balance of those systems serve under 10,000 in population. So it's a lot of small systems there. National Rural Water may be here later on today, which I'm a part of that organization as well. And they may tell you that some of the initiatives they're doing to help small systems with their circuit rider program, with their workforce management program, and with their continuing education program. But what we're seeing is asset identification inventory is on the forefront now. We were very successful in working with VDH, and they're getting US EPA money for systems to tie to that a requirement that a system that received any funding should have some type of asset management program that is ongoing and that is active. We're also trying to tie into a continuing education program into that requirement for small systems. So if they receive any federal money, any state monies, they have to have those items in place. And this is one initiative that seems to have worked. Once you start dealing with someone's money, you start getting their attention. And so we're seeing small systems now beginning to put their asset management program in digitized, putting it into the cloud. It's not as detailed as some of the systems I've seen here, but at least it places it in a virtual world where at least you can attach some asset classes to it. We have a smaller number of customers, which means we have higher rates per connection, large geographical area, the availability of contracting services. If you're like the rest of us, you've seen that pipe projects have tripled. It used to be $75 to $80 a foot in a rural area, and now it's $200 a foot. And so pipe in the ground is getting very expensive to install right now. And finding those contractors, the price is high because those contractors are busy right now. Low to medium household income, MHIs are lower in the areas that we serve. Affordability, just like you just heard about, trying to develop a program with few customers and still make it affordable to those customers who are underserved or perhaps are struggling in areas. There's subsidized water and sewer rates. The reason we're an authority, Halifax County Service Authority, the reason we were formed, and I was part of that conversation, was because those small systems didn't raise rates, didn't sell water the way they should sell water or wastewater services, and provide enough money to replace the infrastructure. So they were subsidized from the general fund, the general tax base of those localities, of those systems. The part that should be putting the park benches in the recreation, in the sidewalks and the streets, was now subsidizing water and sewer. So when the authority was formed, part of that conversation was we need to manage it like a business, and it needs to be self-sustaining. So that's what small systems are doing now. They're forming authorities. They're getting away from the local government managing something that they have no idea how to manage, and specifically putting into a business-oriented group who will move that system forward. And so we're seeing that happening in small systems now, along with some regionalization. The problem with regionalization in large geographical areas is pipe distance, water quality, and what you have to do to maintain that system. So it's very difficult to do that. We are in the technology now, smart meters, smart sensors. Most of us now have smart meters where we can look at a hydraulic grade line just by looking at the meter here and 10 meters downstream, determine where the hydraulic grade line changes abruptly and realize that's where the leak is probably at. So a lot of that technology is coming out now in small systems. We have a decline in population. Our population is getting older. They want to move towards where there are medical services, where they can be provided. They don't want an hour and a half long ambulance ride. Now they want a 5-minute ambulance ride to the hospital. And I can understand that. I'm 63 and getting there one day, I hope. And limited medical rural services. We don't have that services there in the rural areas that we do have in the larger centers. Water quality, cost and concerns. In 1980, I was having a conversation this morning. In 1980, I did the Appalachian Trail hike through. And I remember at that time, there was 2 things that you worried about or was concerned about. One was water. Make sure you had water when you went to sleep at night and when you woke up in the morning. And the next item was you had enough clothes to stay warm. You had enough to keep you warm on the trail. But if you look at the YouTube videos today and the accounts of anybody who does a hike through the Appalachian Trail, what do they have? They have a cell phone. And if they don't have cell phone service, they go crazy, because with a cell phone, they can call someone to bring them water. They can have that service at them. So it's not about a commodity anymore. It's about a service. And I think in rural areas, we've got to change from that commodity thought process into a service process. And I think it's going to come one day, but it's going to take time for that to come on. Higher wages and opportunities. We have people leaving. We have a lower customer base, less water demand. And how do you pay for your system if you don't have water to sell? Or if no one uses that water that you're trying to sell? There's a graph here showing, it's from a University of New Hampshire, that kind of shows metropolitan and non-metropolitan areas and how that population is shifting. And we're seeing that. Matter of fact, in Virginia, 95 counties in Virginia, population has increased in Virginia, but 38 counties have lost population. So people are migrating from those rural areas into these Northern Virginia tidewater areas. So it's a problem that's we're going to have to address sooner or later. Collaboration. And I've got a slide after this I want to get into just for a minute. Apprenticeship programs and recruiting, National Rural Water, which I see someone's here now from National Rural Water, probably talk about that. A great initiative. We're doing it with our local community colleges as well, and trying to tie that continuing education program to the receipt of any federal funding monies. Also shared resources and networks, much like this, the swim here, the academy here, the pipe ID. So we're trying to get small systems interested in this. Small systems, believe it or not, think that they've actually paid for their water system and it's an asset. They don't realize if they've done nothing to it for 20 years, it's a liability. But there's still a little bit of a hindrance to get rid of it or to hand it over to somebody else to maintain it like it should, because they think that they are giving away their destiny and their future, which they're mistaken. If they hang on to it, they're actually condemning their future. And they don't quite understand that. So it takes a lot of public interaction for leaders to understand that. And that's a cultural barrier that we're going to have to overcome. There's a number of water utility associations that I'm involved with: AWWA, National Rural Water, Virginia Water and Waste Authorities Association, and the Municipal Drinking Water in VAMWA, and several more. But there are a lot of collaborative funding sources. CARES Act, if you remember, ARPA, BIL, USDA, VDH. In Virginia, it was unique because the authorities were left out of the CARES Act and the ARPA funding. We had to be fed or channel that money through the localities, the local governments, the towns and cities, in order for us to get that money. So a lot of authorities were left out of that initial influx of money. Regionalization and master planning. How many in this room, raise your hand, have worked with your smaller systems in your area for regional master planning and how to bring redundancy and sustainability or resilience into those systems? Many of us need to do that. You need to reach out to these small systems. I'm going to tell you why in just a few minutes. Develop business and asset management plans. First things first, we have to put it on paper, move it from paper to an analog program, from an analog to a digital program, from a digital program to a cloud-based program, so everyone can access it. That's happening now. It's just not happening at the rate that you're doing in your jurisdictions. There is a program, I think now, by US EPA, 3,301 population or less. There's a resiliency continuing education unit tied to that. In other words, if a small system has to do something to get lead service line replacement monies or get something for a treatment process or any kind of money like that, Part of that process is going to be continuing education, which adds credits to that organization or to that utility. There's a picture on your left. There's the drainage basins in Virginia. I'm at the very bottom, which is the Roanoke River Basin. Our river actually empties into North Carolina, into the Atlantic Ocean there. But those are the watersheds in Virginia. Many of them go to the Chesapeake Bay. Over to the right is just one of those small streams that you see that comes out of the hills in Piedmont area of Virginia. The most important, I think, is to let you know, every one of us, even rural areas, we all live downstream from someone or something, the next event that's going to happen. So with that, larger systems need to realize that their headwaters are where small systems operate, where they discharge, where their discharge permits are, where farmers have farming practices put into place. So when you do your studies for your watershed, make sure you include those small systems. Reach out to them, collaborate with them, see if they need help. More than likely, they'll probably say, I don't want your help, but just tell them, I'm not here to report you or do anything. I'm just here to provide you with some resources if you need those resources. And believe me, small systems don't want a handout. They want they don't want a handout. They just want a hand up. My youngest daughter, we have 5 children, 14 grandbabies. It's probably where I got my management experience from. But our youngest daughter, Beth, is on the left. She's Down's autistic, nonverbal. She's 31 years old, believe it or not. She'll probably always live with us. When she was in early childhood intervention, she was probably 7, 8 years old. She was in elementary school and in a special needs class. And they did a game I'd never seen before. It's kind of like dodgeball, but it's called Stomp the Balloon. And how it works is you can see they tie a balloon to your leg, and then you blow the whistle, and whoever's got their balloon left intact wins the game. Pretty simple, but it's pretty hectic. Regular education class did it. In 5 minutes, the game was over. Hit one guy, held up his balloon. He was the winner. So the special needs kids got out there. Was 8 of them. Beth was one of them. And it took us 15 minutes just to get the balloons tied to the legs. I mean, it was just a struggle. And whistle goes off, and we're waiting. 10 minutes goes by, 15 minutes goes by, lunchtime is coming. So we're thinking, well, they're going to ever stop and hit a balloon. And so Beth, my daughter, took her balloon and tapped her friend on the shoulder, and then she held it on the ground and let her stomp it. And then one by one, every one of those other special needs kids took their balloon to one of their friends and let them stomp the balloon. At the end of the game, all of them were excited and yelling, and no one had a balloon. So it gave me some introspect. It gave me a little bit of, it was one of those aha moments, you know. And I'm thinking, if we in this water industry could share our balloon with someone else, doesn't matter whether you win, but as long as you give someone else an opportunity to be successful in the game, then I think we'll go a long way in meeting some of these stringent requirements in the future of water. And with that, that is my presentation. That's what I've been doing. Stephens from US.
Okay, Jennifer Stephens from Suez, be our last speaker, and then we'll get the speakers up here for some quick.
Talk about a hard act to follow, y'all. How do, this isn't going to let me see my notes, is it? I was telling OJ earlier, I'm like, this is the first time I've given this presentation. This isn't my project. This isn't my work, but I'm excited to give it nonetheless. So I kind of need my notes just to make sure I'm getting all the points across. But while he's doing that, I'll just say a couple words about Suez. We are a private utility. There was a couple of negative comments yesterday on private utilities. I'm not going to call anyone out, but I will say Suez has been around 160 years, all the way back to the Suez Canal. We operate in 40 different countries. We serve 66 million water customers, another 30 or so million waste customers. Let's see, what are our assets look like? We have about 11,000 treatment plants and hundreds of thousands of linear miles of pipe. So just a little bit different than Mark's system. Just a little bit, just a little bit. But we're focused on water services primarily. We also have air services and waste services that go with that. Here in North America, we look a little bit different. We are no longer an operator here in North America. Those assets have transferred to Veolia now. So in North America, we are only a solution provider, a service provider with regards particularly with digital solutions or intelligent solutions. So we have about 100 partners here in North America that are using these digital solutions, about 5,000 daily users in those softwares and platforms. And it's just a really exciting group. Optimatics, which WSSC mentioned earlier, falls into this smart and environmental solutions group. Well, the reason we have the Smart Environmental Solutions group was to share our experience, right? We've had this experience as being an operator, a utility owner, and we've learned quite a few lessons. And because we have that information available and that knowledge available, we wanted to share it out. And so that's where the Smart Environmental Solutions group came together, where we can start packaging some in-house solutions, digital solutions, and sharing them out within the water community. One of those systems or solutions is Aqua Advanced, and it's a suite of solutions all across the entire water cycle that really focus on reducing operating costs, ensuring consistent operation, to operate the networks more efficiently, improve water quality, and enhance decision support overall. Well, since this is an initiatives, a utility initiatives session, I wanted to focus on one particular initiative that Suez is taking globally at all of our locations, which is energy reduction. Climate, right, change, and all of the problems that are coming along with that. Obviously, as such a large operator with all those plants and all those pump stations, we consume quite a bit of energy. And so we've made an initiative to reduce that footprint over the next several years. And we're doing that with, first and foremost, with our Aqua Advanced energy platform. We've seen energy platforms within treatment plants that optimize the aeration process or optimize a chemical process to reduce energy costs there. But what I want to talk about is reducing energy costs outside the plant, out in the pump stations and within the system itself. The reason we're doing that is because there is so much infrastructure we're dealing with that we need to reduce those operating costs and manage all elements of energy. So you can see that the capital costs and the maintenance cost of a pump can be dwarfed by the operating costs and the energy, the electricity consumption. What is it? It's 95% of the lifetime costs of that asset is the consumption of energy. It's a lot of energy, a lot of costs that are being used out within the system. So we really wanted to lower those life cycle costs and making use of the assets to ensure their durability, their longevity. This doesn't mean go out and buy all new energy efficient pumps, which everyone would love to do. There's some really cool pumps out there, but using the assets that you have more efficiently. We want to make sure that we can do this while still supporting uninterrupted service, by still continuing to keep pressures up within our for emergency situations, and of course to ensure water quality across the system is maintained. Like I said, our initiative here is to reduce carbon emissions by optimizing system-wide efficiency. Right. So this is going to allow us to comply with national and international environmental regulations that are coming on, as well as address our particular ESGs with regard to environmental and social government, sustainability and governance. Yeah. So how does this work? How do we do this? Well, we use the available network and the available data, and we calculate and implement the optimized operating schedules. What does that mean? Right? Within both the production and the distribution, we have an assumed load that we're going to be taking, and we have an assumed volume of water that we need to produce. Right? What's the demand? How can we now meet these demands in the most optimal manner? Right? So we take the data, all of our past data within our SCADA historians, and we can now use that and learn from it to predict forward. Based off of the patterns that we've seen in the past, how can we then predict and get ahead of the curve, if you will, for operations? From that data, we derive optimization schedules, and that's updated every 30 minutes, or it can be, you can push to optimize at any given time using the optimizer, again, the optimizer engine that we all know and love. Right? So once that prediction comes in, it's updated. It says based off of what we've seen in the past, based off of what is trending right now, looking forward, we expect for the demand to be X. Therefore, the optimal set points within your system are at these levels. That's then analyzed within the digital twin, buzzword, right? To see if this is right? To verify that the set points are accurate within the hydraulic model, within the operating model, before it gets pushed out. And that can be done in real time with real-time control, or just as a decision support. Right? It doesn't have to be remote operated. Let's see. It's a big system, right? So how do we choose the right times and the right schedules to take advantage of electricity and demand and balance it all out? In a previous role over at Xylem, we always used the stock exchange type of idea, where it's the supply and demand, who wants to buy, who wants to sell. Exact same idea here within the energy consumption and with the pumping within the system. What are the costs at any given time? What's the demand at that given time? And how can we balance everything to get the optimal output? So we do this by operating the pumps and pump combinations at different efficiency points using less energy, while also improving water quality. So this is increasing our water turnover, and it decreases water age, and thereby enforcing the water quality policies while still reducing the energy consumption. It maintains a consistency and reliability of the operations through the automated systems, or through a decision support system, like I said before, where it's offering multiple scenarios for operators on how to best set their pumps moving forward. Quick screen grab of what this might look like for an operator. You can see multiple things here. There's a map with an integrated view of the water production and distribution system. It's highlighting hydraulic data near real time with some key performance indicators and alerts that are going on there. The water demand forecasts are updated every 30 minutes. And so everything in the light blue shaded is predicted moving forward, right? And so you can change that bar as necessary to see where do I need to be in 4 hours, where do I need to be in 8 hours, where does the next shift need to be, right? So that they can prepare for what's coming up. So this allows us to manage, of course, energy costs and constraints, maximize the use of off-peak electricity periods, and handle the electricity demand charges in real time. I'll skip forward to a quick case study, and this is a North American utility that is now owned and operated by Veolia. But the utility was facing extreme growth. You can see the numbers there although the font got a little messed up, so you can't, it didn't come over quite as well. But they're producing 42 million gallons a day. What does that say there? I can't even see, it's got all messed up, and had over $2.3 million in energy expenses. It was a very large expense for this utility, and they wanted to make an effort to reduce those costs while increasing the reliability of their system. Again, I apologize, the font's got a little squished up here as well. But the program kicked off late 2015 with full factory acceptance and testing by mid 2016 and full on-site implementation by late 2016. So about a year to get all of this up and running at full. So post-installation showed an efficiency improvement of about 7%, right? And that was just from operating with the new pump schedules, right? Once they moved into real-time control, those numbers went up to 8-10%, and that all correlated back to about a 10% savings annually in costs. These are lower numbers than you might see in the plants. When we look at optimization of treatment plants, we're saying 30%. Energy efficiency, but note this is outside the fence. We're looking at pump stations, distributed systems all over. Even with with this 10% annual savings, they expected to see a payback within the 10-year period. So multi-million dollars worth of savings that made it well worth the utility to install, and they still have this system in place, and Veolia is operating this system now with the dashboard that you saw on the previous slide. One last slide to show, to give you an idea again of the savings and efficiency gain throughout the year, right? Because obviously we have different demands throughout the year. And so you see that we peak here at 27% savings, cost savings in the winter. Very nice savings there. But then in the summer, it goes down, right? The demand is a little higher. And so we're down, in that 4 to 5% saving. Overall, it does average out to about 8% savings, 15% annual cost savings, and then 8% in the efficiency gains throughout the system. So happy numbers here. We're very excited for that. And of course, now this is being implemented at our systems all over the world. So if you add it all up, we really feel like we're making an impact, reducing our carbon footprint, reducing carbon emissions globally, which was, of course, the point of this initiative. So with that, we'll throw it back over to you, Walt.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Now I'd like to ask our speakers to come up here for a question and answer session. We'll get some chairs so nobody's standing. Oh. Okay, great. Well, I might have some questions for the panel here, but does anybody in the audience want to start this off? You don't need to. Anybody have any questions for any of our speakers here to start with? Oh, okay, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So I guess this question is more directed at Will, but certainly all of you can answer. I mean, you had mentioned in your presentation about looking at alternative energy sources. I wasn't sure if that, considering this panel consists of utility initiatives, is one of the initiatives goes beyond alternative energy sources and kind of, as Jen just alluded to, is looking at energy conservation or reduction in any way, and if there are specific targets that your utility is trying to achieve.
Fantastic question. Whether we're pursuing specific targets, I do know we are working to tap into different resources that we have available to us. I don't know if we have a specific numerical goal or not. There's probably somebody in the organization that does have one. From an energy source, one of the other things that we're also tying into is the thermal energy that's within the wastewater flow. We've got a significant number of very large sewers. I mean, some of our sewers are 20, 24 feet in diameter, and some of them have a pretty constant flow with obviously a pretty constant temperature. So the ability to tap into that as an alternative energy source as well. And then of course we have our at Blue Plains, we're producing quite a bit of energy there ourselves. We're the largest energy consumer in the district, by a pretty wide margin. And being able to having reduced our energy consumption by 30% is a significant carbon reduction. So there's a number of sources that the organization, broadly speaking, is looking into. I don't know if there's a specific target or not.
Right, anybody else want to address that on the
Yeah,
panel?
SUEZ has the unique benefit here to have the solid waste as well. And so we're certainly looking at alternate energy sources through our solid waste pieces. And so with that, I'd say there are a lot of options out there. So look at partnering with other local utilities, with your waste services, with your your gas and electric utilities, to work this out. It's one water, right? We talk a lot about one water, but it's one community also. And so working together throughout the community is going to help with that.
Okay, right.
I
Um,
just want to mention one thing, like we are actually building a bioenergy new facility to use biosolids. Yeah.
I got a question for you. Last couple of days, we've been talking about several recurring themes, and one of them's been communications. We're talking about how to communicate with our customers and stuff, and looking to be more transparent in the way we deliver our service. How are data analytics helping any of your utilities to be able to communicate with your customers better? I'll put that to OJ first, and then he can get it started here.
Thank you for that one. That's a great question. First of all, as far as communications from a utility standpoint, there are quite a few of us that pretty much suck at this. We're not very good at wagging our own tail, and that's one of the big pieces when we talk about the value that utilities bring and being that value being recognized in their communities is getting those pieces out there. So any tools that you can have to be transparent. It's not enough to just plop it on your website, but really diving into the world of social media and really pushing that out. I know Northeast Ohio does a great job of that. They have a kind of a funny edge to their Twitter feed, and it's renowned. But getting that information out there, along with the data that is buried somewhere, but data that they would care about, not just the data we care about, but really getting it out to the communities is something that we all have to do a better job of.
If I can add a little bit to that as well, an example for us in our lead-free DC program, we've got 28,000 lead services in the district that we're going to remove by 2030. And a significant component of that on the communications perspective to the local residents, you can pull up a map of DC, you can go to every single address and you can see if it's known lead, known non-lead, or unknown. There is, for anybody who's looked at that kind of data, and especially over a system as old as ours, some of those unknowns or even some of those knowns are assumptions. And looking at the way we communicate that to our customers on that map with a 3-colored button, it's either green, gray, or white, doesn't always convey the nuances of that, and making sure that we can communicate that effectively while addressing some of the nuances. If we show a street that's got 12 copper and 2 lead, is that real, or what kind of assumptions are in that? And if somebody looks at that map and says, hey, I think I have copper, we come and do a test, but we find out it's lead, making sure that we're communicating the information as accurately as we can is an interesting challenge.
I'll just add, I find it, I suppose, pretty heartbreaking communicating because we think, if you're a community, local government and you do your job well, you should be fairly invisible to some people. Like people shouldn't have to worry about some of the basics that we provide to them. So that means that when you try to communicate good news to them, a lot of people don't really care. So when we were giving them information about, statistics about smart sewers and reduction in overflows, it doesn't really go anywhere, even though the local paper will print anything, so that's fine. But when it comes to like we saved we saved something like $11,500 per household on the cost of the long-term control plan. Didn't really go anywhere. We saved reduction in like sewer backups, increase in the water quality there doesn't really go anywhere. But then you get one 500-year flood, and all of a sudden people are saying this used to happen before smart sewers, and that's really heartbreaking. That's really heartbreaking. So, so we hired a in-house director of marketing because, like OJ was saying, when you we're like an engineering team of like 11 or 12 people. And then, like you can grasp right now, communications are not obviously our strong point when it comes to, it's okay talking to a group like this, but talking to just the general, you get into details too quickly and you talk technical aspects too quickly and it gets lost in the details. So it's something we've had to improve a lot for us, but it is heartbreaking when we look at, we're patting ourselves on the back, us like our own team, and we think how a greater job we've done. And all people say is this used to happen before smart sewers. And you try to get into the story, or you try to say, well, this actually didn't happen because of that, because here are the reasons why it can't happen. And, technically speaking, we do have the old system is in place and the new system is added on top of it and the old system is still there. So anything that would be done is just an improvement. But yeah, it's something that we've struggled with communications, and hopefully things have improved lately. And we're always trying to, I suppose we thought we would have gotten better appreciation from the community for the work that we did. But you don't really, it goes back to, if you do your job well, you should be fairly invisible to the community. And that's, I suppose, trying to pull ourselves back and just being invisible again is where I'd like to be.
It's been said the evil men do lives after them, but the good is often interred in their bones. So communication is a double-edged sword. You open up yourself up for criticism, but you can learn from the criticism on how to meet your customer needs. But one of the best ways, I think, is still doing like we're doing. We're sitting here face to face, go to your local council meeting, your local city meeting, introduce who you are, what you're doing, and the positive aspects of what you're trying to achieve, and bring them on board. It's an educational process for a lot of the town city leaders, just like it is for us.
No. How is the ESG concept being built into the way you try to run your business now? Jennifer, you want to?
Yeah, I mentioned the ESGs and those the sustainability goals that are put out there. Sometimes we, again, going back to we're engineers, it's like it's a little fluffy for me, but we can get into the numbers, right? We can start doing the analytics and using the data that we have to show, what, we are doing some really cool things. And what can we do to pivot if needed to more sustainability, to more environmental focused, and communicating that out, right? The new generation, the new workforce generation coming in is interested in that. And that is a big part of who they are as a generation. And so I think it's going to be important for utilities in attracting new talent to make sure that they have ESGs just like the corporations do.
Yeah, I was wondering at what point we're going to get around to the workforce issue, because that comes up all the time. What any workforce, any kind of attraction ideas that you as utilities have to try to attract new talent or retain the talent we have now? Any kind of initiatives internally you're doing in that respect?
I'm holding the mic, so I'm going to go. I'm passionate on this one, absolutely. And I think women and youth are the future in our industry. I was really excited to see several leading women and practice leaders up here yesterday that were female, right? And attracting a different community into the workforce is part of that. But also tapping into our local workforces, tapping into those communities. OJ, you talked a lot about your disadvantaged communities that they don't know, they don't care, but can we go to them and say, there's a job here for you? Look at my work chart, right? Their org chart. There are more vacant positions than there are filled positions in some of the groups. And so communicating that out, that there is availability, that there's on-the-job training that's available to bring them in, right? And the second piece of that is the digital, right? We're a digital world now. The kids don't know how to turn a wrench, but they sure know how to operate a smart platform. So moving into the digital aspects of things is going to attract a new workforce as well.
About 10 years ago, our organization went into a cloud-based utility asset management program. And one of those things was to get away from a paper-bound manual and go to YouTube videos for everything, how to reset this clarifier blower, how to do all of this step by step. And once we did that, we were able to attract a younger workforce. The other initiative we did was, and I'm not trying to say get out of the old or less productive or cost you more money, but they do, is to encourage those who have been in the system 30, 40 years an incentive to leave. Most of our in rural areas, the reason they're hanging on so long is because they can't afford insurance if they leave. So we have an incentive that we can pay their insurance, get them out of the system if they want to leave, capture that institutional knowledge they have, bring on a younger workforce for a little less money, more energetic and new innovative ideas. So it's a process we're working through now, and that's part of this whole workforce dynamic management system that we got going on now.
So our workforce development starts K-8. If you're not reaching those children there and introducing them to the water sector, then you're not getting it right, because you have to introduce to them. So in the city of Buffalo, we don't have, there's no TV program that kind of promotes water or anything else like that. Like you're not going to be an investigator, but really we're trying to get in there, introduce them to not only stormwater, green infrastructure, but also just every aspect of drinking water and the water things that we do. But that leads us into working with our community college, and that leads us into our green infrastructure stewardship program, where we've brought in our next cohort of folks that, hey, we grab you right from the community, we provide you the skills, the training, the necessary certifications, and guess what we got for you? We got a job. You make it through, we got a job. Now go tell your buddies, we need more folks coming in. And so that's what we're really trying to do, because we have jobs. We'll take you from having a GED to a PhD. We got them all. So, sorry.
Just a small comment, just to tie in the last question to this question as well. One thing that I find frustrating is that new generation of people that want to get into environmental science and engineering, guided 20 years ago, sustainability, I hope it doesn't sound controversial, but it's been overtaken by exclusively by climate change. Everybody that thinks about sustainability nowadays are talking about exclusively about climate change. Our own sustainability office did their new mission statement a couple of weeks back, and it's just about climate change. So like clean water is just getting kind of forgotten about a little bit, and that's frustrating. Clean water, clean air, these things that aren't directly about climate change. So making sure that our voice as industry isn't forgotten, and that new generation of graduates in this area don't want to just work exclusively in carbon area. We remain able to draw graduates, and for us, and for me personally, like if I was just working in a sewer system and just looking at numbers, that'd be pretty frustrating. But doing the stuff that we do in the smart sewers, it adds an element of interest to me. It keeps me interested in it, and it for prospective like employees as well. It's just kind of, as an engineer, it's just cooler to be able to work on something that's cutting edge and more interesting than just humdrum sewer maintenance work.
Right. Okay, Ting, and then Hugh, and then. Okay, well, Ting, you go first.
Go. Thank you, Water. So you all have the great presentation, a story about how to leverage data to tell the powerful story, whether it's CSO reduction or whether it's asset management or lab program improvement, other things. So I'm thinking back about, the future workforce development, but for the existing workforce, there's almost like a skill set shift. So the operators today, they don't need to go around and to get all the pen and the clipboard and getting that information, because they can leverage iPad and the digital device to get that information seamlessly integrated. I think it's working well, but also we get into this foundational question about digitalization. Yesterday, we talked about some documentation, SOPs, and data standards, because I know WSSC, you talk about a lot of data is not usable, and that requires change management and culture change as well with the existing workforce, that they are changing to a different type of skill sets. So I'm just curious about how you all do about culture change and type of a standard policy governance that you put in place, whether you are going through like a holistic approach or you are doing it more on the program level or on the project basis. Thank you.
I think we have to look at asset management as a holistic approach, not just the assets, the tangible assets that we touch and work with every day, but the human aspect of it, because that's the greatest asset. Is how do you keep that asset up to date? How do you keep that asset renewed? How do you make sure it's full of life and serving its purpose? And like you said, it's really difficult. You have to do a team building, bring them in and let them know that they're part of this change. Change to me always brings pain. I mean, I walked here this morning, saw people running with nobody chasing them. But change always brings pain. So we have to look at how do we bring those people on board and then let them know that it's part of their idea and they're part of it.
Okay, anybody have any things?
Just one to address a small portion of that. There's any of those broader, bigger change initiatives, it do have to start with interaction and involving those who are going to be part of the change, who are going to have to live with the change, in defining what that future change is going to be, and finding those pain points and connecting it to the why, what's in it for me, kind of a thing. Here's the benefit that you're going to see, and starting it off with that, such that the then on the job training that has to come after that is attached to a reason that somebody can attach to, a benefit that's going to make their day to day easier, more efficient, whatever it might be.
Okay, right.
So I'll just talk a little bit, like, again, maybe a very small piece of it, more in, you mentioned data governance, right? So that involves change management. So I think it's the goal, ultimate goal definitely needs to be holistic, but we need to start somewhere, right? And then, so it's a combination. Like, I think you have a goal, and then you also need to find, looking at the goal and then have a specific plan where you should start, right? And then just work. It goes both ways, right? So you will need for anything like cultural change, whether it's just with, like, for us, like, for example, just a very small program in it, but or like a big overall cultural change within the organization, will be to reach the goal. You will have to have leadership support, right? So you'll have that, but then you also have to start from somewhere, from like a grassroots support as well, right? So you will need to go, in my mind, like, you have a goal that's holistic, but then you also have to have very specific action items that actually goes from bottom up.
Okay, great. We'll go Hugh, then Shirley, and we have like 5 minutes, so we'll try that.
So I want to dig in a little bit on something that Karen brought up, which is there is a large conversation that's happening and a very untapped funding source in the ESG space that water has actually no representation in. What I wanted to somewhat ask is, in most cases, as Will highlighted, the utilities are the biggest users of power within their municipal districts, right? But also they have a very significant role to play within the net zero carbon push that's going forward. But right now we're really not engaged in what is not only the conversation that's happening there, the context of it, but the funding opportunities that are definitely being leveraged there. I was in Denver at a big ESG conference. Water had no representation. Everybody else was talking about which Fortune 500 companies were going to be investing in carbon bonds and net reduction that was there. Nobody considered anything in the water municipal space at all. Specifically for you, OJ, you guys did a pretty innovative environmental impact bond in Buffalo. What is your viewpoint as to how water, specifically water utilities, can really start to engage in that space and also try to transition from this rate-based financial model and start to tap into this broader context?
Yeah, Hugh, that's an excellent question. One of the things we've been trying to do in New York is really throw elbows around. You're right, we have not been part of that conversation. And in fact, when we are looked at as part of that conversation, it's in the negative. And not as a resource, that the resource that water is. And so you mentioned our environmental impact bond, where we've gone out and really focusing on the ESG piece for our green infrastructure, right? That's our next commitment. It's a $50 million, largest green bond that was done to date in the States. And, we put it out there to just double down on the, over 1,100 acres that we've already installed in the city of Buffalo. But that is what's going to bring our city back. We want to make sure that what we're doing, the environmental solutions that we are seeking to provide, is being provided by the people in our city, and that's not being extracted out of our community. But it's a very excellent point. Whereas we have to get in it, we have to continue to make our presence known and know that, hey, water is part of this, and it has to be part of this. Kieran mentioned climate. Listen, water. Climate manifests itself through water in the city of Buffalo, whether that's 7 feet of snow or the lake effect snows, or the waves that originate in Toledo and find their ways on the shore at our water facility. We are really seeking to not only make water a known resource, but really kind of push the envelope on getting into the ESG piece.
Shirley.
Hi, Thurstal, thank you for a wonderful panel, and Mark specifically for sharing a personal story. I think that side is often missing in a lot of conferences and events, so thank you. For the panelists here, we often see financial or procurement related challenges as inhibitors to innovation, especially smart technologies. Curious about any innovative business models or business models you've applied, whether it's data as a service or others, to really get buy-in from your personnel across the utility.
I will just point to a gentleman sitting over here, Robert Bornhofen, who you got to meet. Working on at DC Water, we have our Blue Drop program, which is I look at that as an innovation in and of itself, but in particular looking to create revenue with I'm going to say resources that we have, using resources in a very, very broad kind of a term. And looking at that business model as a way of generating revenue, which can reduce rates, it can provide services, it can do a range of any of those creative solutions that come out of that, the Blue Drop model that we have for DC Water.
Can I add to that real quick, since you introduced me? We do a couple of things that might be a little innovative, but we have a sum of money in this group, this function, and we make that money available to projects that might be challenged with funding. We provide grants, we provide low interest loans, but it's working capital that we invest, and it's outside the operating budget. So it's one way we can get some inexpensive prototypes off the ground to see how they work.
One of the things that we're looking at is, we're so used to smart meters, AMI systems, and using a network as a service. If someone else analyzes your network while you do too, is to find out what's going on. Maybe use asset management as a service, or network as a service for asset management as well. So someone else can take a look at your assets while you are looking at them to help you understand what's going on and remedy that. Getting back to the funding issues and what's priority and should we do, energy reduction and so forth. I think all of us in this room want to do that, but that's chronic. The acute issues are the UMCR5 and the contaminants that we have to address now, and the health issues, the lead service lines, those kind of things. So it's almost like we can't get nothing done for having to work. And so I think we've got so much on a plate right now, it's very difficult to address all of those issues.
Yes, Beata.
Hi, this is Beata Wright, Carollo Engineers. Great panel discussion. And yesterday, a lot of the topics that you guys talked about were also kind of themes. And Hugh just triggered another question for me overarchingly about energy and water, one water, right? And how it's the second highest cost for our utilities next to personnel. And yet, are we really talking to the energy folks? Are we as a nation, as water utilities? And I look back at my time at the Water Research Foundation, and a lot of the water sector organizations, put together this white paper on energy water nexus. And it was eye-opening to me how the DOE and energy has oodles of money that they're spending on energy issues that also address water, but they have no understanding of the water utility space really, and how we think about it, what our issues are. And I think it's an untapped opportunity, and maybe that's another item that we can talk about at the national panel with Adam Krantz and others on how can we in the water space work with our DOE partners and represent water in energy, and how can we take that opportunity and talk to our ag friends with water from the water sector. So we can do better, I think. And so I'm interested in your perspectives, if you guys see that potential for funding ESG space, energy, but also just making the right decisions in a one water space. So thank you.
I look at that. So I live in Northern Virginia now. I'm originally from Arizona. So when you talk about the nexus of water and energy, it's a slightly different issue, but it's still kind of the same issue, right? And it's definitely front of mind for communities who don't have enough water. Here, your former mayor, who's now in the administration, is fond of saying we had water in the places where we didn't want it, and we had. He said it much more eloquently, right? When you're running for president, you say it eloquently. You have water where you don't need it, and you don't have it where you need it. It's definitely tremendous opportunities. That movement of water and the movement of the energy, and those two being tied together, definitely tremendous opportunities there.
Okay, this will wrap it up.
Okay. We're running out of time. I apologize for that.
We have to take coffee breaks now.
Oh, okay. So we have to catch up with the speakers individually. Sorry. So I want to thank everyone for presenting today. It's been great, been super interesting. Really had a lot of great topics we discussed. I appreciate it.
Okay, so we take a 15-minute coffee break. You can bring the coffee or whatever you have to bring in this room. We will start at 11, our next session.
I will.
So we need to connect because you left and all the Fred. Maybe I will set up meeting with Fred.
Yeah, right. So Fred has been our main.
Sure, I know.
Yeah, I agree with
Right, so we all just our innovation.
They've already gone.